Ja, dat is doen.
Ja, nee, maakt niet uit. Ina steen in de kant.
Okay, I'll begin. Welcome iedereen, welcome to everybody this is the fourth Science and Policy sessions. Welcome to everybody watching through the internet, wherever you are. We're going to talk about intellectual property of seeds and plants and all the problems it might bring and all the challenges it might bring. Bram de Jonge from Wageningen University and Jaap Satter from the Ministry of Economic Affairs here in Holland. Let's start off very simple, just by explaining what it is, the intellectual property of seeds and plants. Because I think most people know this, but in a way you think a plant belongs to nature, seed belongs to nature. How can you own the intellectual property of a plant? Please, Bram.
Well, since some years now, we have different systems to protect the intellectual property in relation to new plants or new inventions that are used in a plant. So the idea is, from one system, plant breeder rights, that as a breeder, if you create a new variety, then you can protect that variety through a plant breeder right. You have also the patent system. That means in most countries, plant varieties itself cannot be patented, but you can, for example, have a genetic construct that you have patented, that you put in certain crop or certain species, and then you have, of course, the intellectual property protection on that variety because of the patented construct that you have included. So it is seen as an invention.
It's all about habits of a plant. So you make a tomato that has more taste, that is needs less water, that grows bigger, whatever you invent, and that's the invention that you can own as intellectual property.
Yes, exactly. Intellectual property. It says it's the creation of the mind, the intangible property which you have, and the difficulty in this field is, of course, that we are talking about living material. But then still, it's being considered at the moment in most countries that even living material can be constructed or manipulated or changed by a human being. So it's not a natural artifact anymore. It's not a discovery as such. But indeed, there is always a discussion on where the boundary lies between what is a discovery, what does nature self, and what has the human being done.
Let's talk about money. Jaap Satter from the Ministry of Economic Affairs. In Holland, how much money is made, do you know, in the sector of plants and seeds?
Yes, I do know, but it's an estimate. Best estimate is between 2 billion and 2.5 billion a year.
So it's a big sector
The
here.
seeds and propagation industry in the Netherlands is, well, I dare to say, especially on horticultural varieties, the number one in the world. The other agricultural varieties like maize and soy, there are other companies outside the Netherlands and outside Europe. But for horticulture, yes, we are probably, as a sector, we have the number one in the world within our borders.
Suppose someone would invent the perfect tomato and someone else would want to grow it. How much money should you pay in a normal construction? What kind of money should you pay as a farmer to make use of someone's invention?
Well, talking about a perfect tomato, that's something I wouldn't know, because I wouldn't know what a perfect tomato is, because every market has its own idea about what is a perfect tomato. For instance, in Italy, the idea of what perfection in a tomato is totally different from the Netherlands. But to give you one idea, a good quality variety of current Dutch tomato, you will have to pay about 100,000 euros per kilogram. But then I must add that seems a lot, but to the grower it will probably make him between, depending on the market price, 8 or 10 million from that 1 kilo. And what the consumer prices are, maybe you can triple it again. So
but that's
100,000
kilogram of seed, not kilogram of tomato, of course, because otherwise it would be quite expensive.
Talking about seeds.
We're talking about seeds, okay. Now, you said in your address earlier on that most countries do have a form of protection of intellectual property of seeds, in whatever way, but in most countries, as an innovator, your intellectual property is defended. But there was one big gap on the map, and that is Africa. What does that mean for someone who has invented the perfect tomato? Can he access the African market, or will his ideas be copied and stolen?
Well, you can look at it from different perspectives, but you see still companies and also tomato breeders going to countries in Africa with their material, with their seed, because there are no competitors. You know, you can, even if you don't have your protection, intellectual property protection, then still it can be the case that the market is as such that you are the only producer in that country. So where's your threat? Second, there are also other means of protecting your materials. You can use trade secrets, just making sure that no one can touch or know or can access your material. And otherwise, you have technological means, hybrids, which simply can be not, if you copy it, if you replant the seed from a harvest, then the yield is so much lower that's simply not interesting commercially. So in that way, you see in certain fields of crops that companies still enter markets in countries where there's very weak intellectual property protection. But on an average, you all very much hear companies saying that, well, for some countries the protection system is just too weak. We don't take our best materials to these countries. India is an example of that.
And now this is the part where the discussion gets difficult, and people tend to have big opinions in either direction, whether it should be implemented in Africa or not. Should we have the same protection of intellectual property when it comes to seeds and plants in Africa as elsewhere, especially when it comes to the access to the market of local farmers? One argument would be that it's unfair, that other people simply cannot have any competition with the much more advanced plants. What do you think about that argument?
Well, I'm not going into what's fair or unfair, or deemed fair or unfair by others, but I think that's a normal market development. If you have a better product on the market, then yes, your competitors will lose out, whether it's a tomato or a car or anything else. The better producer with the better product has a certain advantage in the market, so to say. So
that's part of our system, that you have, let's say, the right to be better than others, or you should be allowed to have a better product than others.
Some would even say you have the responsibility to try to be better than others.
So now you have a farmer who makes simple, old-fashioned tomatoes the way we used to. Where does he get his seed? Take a country as Kenya. It won't be tomatoes in Kenya, I think, but let's say French beans or cassava or...
Well, yeah, it's really depending, of course, on the crop. French beans is an export crop. It's really very popular for breeding companies to have their production of French beans in Kenya. The production is much cheaper, and you ship it out. So you see with French beans that material comes from foreign breeders. They are protected by plant variety rights. They have a stake, and they will protect their product within the Kenyan territory and make sure that any kind of export of French beans out of that country is not infringing their plant variety protection rights. But if you look at cassava, no Dutch company, cassava is actually an interesting crop because it used to be the poor man's crop. It was only the really poor farmer. It's very bulky. What can you do with it? But it's always there and it grows. It grows even if there's really a drought. But now cassava gets much more popular. Cassava is used increasingly in so many different products. So there's more and more commercial interest. So it's interesting to see where that will lead to in terms of the impact of intellectual property protection on the ground and with respect to cassava growers. It's difficult to predict, but of course the resistance you see in the field of certain societal groups is about that the plant variety protection, for example, will not allow these farmers anymore, if it's a protected variety, to save their seed, or for sure not to exchange their seed or to sell it on the market. And that will be something that these farmers used to do. Of course, for centuries. I mean, that's how a farmer does. You save your seed, you exchange with your neighbors, you try to select the best seed, and you continue. And what you have left, you sell on the market.
Now, would implementing intellectual property rights of seeds in Africa, would that be in the interest of big Western companies, or would it also be in the interest of the local farmers?
Well, I think intellectual property rights are a tool, and it depends on how you use it, what kind of parties you create incentives for, and because it's also, I mean, the length of protection or the strength of protection says it in itself already. If you have a very strong protection, then especially the right holder will benefit. You can get in that term period all the earnings. Anyone that wants to use the material for commercial purposes or even just for growing on a non-commercial scale will have to pay royalties to this person if it's enforced. But if you have very little protection, then anyone can copy it immediately. But where is then the incentive for a breeder to introduce this elite material or to do new research for development of new varieties again? So it's a balance, and you have to think very well where you want to put your balance as a country or as a region. And that's how countries used to go about with intellectual property legislation always in history. The Netherlands is a good example. We were one of the latest countries that at a patent law, because we are so small, and we had some companies like Philips. So it was very interesting because we are so small. There's a little competition in the country itself. So you do not need the protection in the country itself. If you don't have a patent protection in your country, then products from others can be used here for free without infringing. You can build on that technology very fast, and you can sell it in other countries where you can protect your technology because they have patent laws. And that's how the Netherlands did it a century ago. That is how many Asian countries did it 20 years ago. But now the rules have changed with the World Trade Organization. This is more difficult. It's getting more difficult for countries to make use in their own interest through intellectual property legislation.
So you are thinking about a new system that will be good for the innovators here, that will be good for the local farmers over there, that will also be accepted by NGOs and other organizations. So it's finding a way to save the chicken and the egg and how do you say that? Save the goat and the cheese? No, what was it?
I have no idea. But
there's an expression for this.
Well, it's we don't come up with a new system. It's really about tweaking, tailoring systems to find that balance, to try to get an intellectual property protection regime that can care for different interests that you have as a country, as a society. I mean, You don't want in your agriculture sector that economic development competes with food security. I mean, you want to serve them both. So how can you do that? That's the thing. And if that in the end, because at the moment you see governments, industry, and civil society organizations really opposing each other and throwing dirt to each other. So whether it will be acceptable to all parties is to be seen.
Who are you talking to? Because you're in the process of innovating, finding a new way. Who are other parties that you've been talking to recently?
Well, we try to reach out to all the stakeholders that are most present. So that these are the NGOs, these are the offices that aim to govern plant variety protection, and of course the breeding companies.
Where does the Dutch government come in? Because you're in the process of talking and thinking, which is also something I think a government should do. But who do you talk to from the Ministry of Economic Affairs when it comes to this kind of innovation?
I think pretty much the same stakeholders Mr. de Jonge is talking about, referring to. And let me make one thing very clear, that the Dutch government indeed looks very interested in the idea of the differentiated seed system and differentiated plant variety protections, especially because we do indeed have to serve both the interests of economic development and food security. So that's one of the things we're trying to connect and align, and it's a difficult thing because policy making is sometimes trying to combine the things and issues and views which are sometimes thought as not to be combined, especially by that same stakeholder group. Because, NGOs are very adamant on their point of view. Governments are, the science community, same story. So it's a difficult thing, but we have to do it. Something being difficult is no reason of saying, okay, let it be, we don't interfere in any way.
One of the things that is difficult in this discussion is the question, what is the market? Because you have the world market, you have our market, but for which products are being produced in other countries, or you have the local market. But do you think whatever kind of system you invent, whatever rule you make, should apply to all the markets at once?
Well, it's not a question whether it should, it does.
It will.
Yeah, it will. So so you have to think twice about the impact that your legislation, for example, has on all these different markets. Because often it's forgotten that there are different markets. Yeah? You focus, plant variety protection is often considered to be a tool to stimulate commercial farming and export markets. That's where your focus then goes. And then you forget about, well, what does that apply then if the same legislation will count for these food crops? And if my public institutions, which I actually want to do breeding for food security purposes, because I cut in the funding each and every year, they start to apply plant variety protection themselves. And in that course, they turn from sorghum to maize because they can make some money there. Is that what you want to achieve? Yes or no? But you have to think about it when you put these legislation in the papers.
If you want to use someone else's innovated seed, then you have to pay for it. If you would only want to use it for research, to do your own innovation, is that a different system? Do you have to pay too to use other one's seeds for innovation?
You have a research exemption, and the protection itself becomes relevant in the moment you start to commercialize a new variety. But you have the research exemption, so there's quite a lot of freedom to do research.
Yeah, but then there's of course a difference between, again, the patents and the plant variety rights, or the plant breeder right, because with that last one, plant breeder rights, anyone can use existing variety for development and commercialization of a new variety again. So because, I mean, that's so typical for breeding. It depends on the continuous crossing and selection of different varieties. For each new variety, you have been used hundreds of crossings or thousands of crossings. So you need to have free access also to be able to commercialize. So that's also where the two systems now, and especially also in the Netherlands, there's quite a discussion on how, if you have suddenly a patented trait involved, can you then not use that whole material anymore in your breeding programs? I mean, because patents bring a much stronger protection, have a much stronger protection, and then even the research exemption does not exist anymore, because breeding is considered to be, can easily lead to a commercial product, so you are infringing from the start. And that's another discussion, a complex one again. We do that next time, I guess.
If I may add something shortly, in the Netherlands, we from July the 1st, we have a limited exemption within the patent law, the Dutch patent law, in place and we're in working order. And as a government, we are very busy to work on a broader exemption, but that will be on the European level, because that's not really interesting to keep that limited to the Netherlands only, but we work on this on the European level.
That is the next difficulty, that even if you invent the perfect system, then you have to get it implemented, and that is political, and that is often different than just the intellectual process, I think. Thank you for now. Does anyone have any questions regarding this subject? No questions?
Okay, sorry. I would like to know more. You were saying that NGOs and government agencies are throwing dirt to each other. Can you explain a little bit more? What are the arguments? What is at stake?
Yes, certainly, and you can just Google plant variety protection in Africa, and you find all the dirt on your plate. Well, there are many issues. The fact mainly at the moment is that civil society does not feel to be consulted in the process towards what is now going on in many African countries, towards getting a plant variety protection system in place. And there are many concerns in respect to the threats for small farmers on different levels. Can they still save and exchange their seed? Biopiracy, will their seeds be stolen and suddenly be protected by a foreign multinational? So there are, and because they have not been consulted, they feel the need to throw dirt to get some attention and to get to come up for the stakeholders they represent.
If I may add something to that indeed that is the case, but we must not forget that the African states have a national sovereignty and their own responsibility to form the process in which they make their own legislation. It's very easy to throw dirt, as always, but well, national sovereignty is something, and it's something worthwhile. And if you feel excluded, I think that throwing dirt in general is not actually the way to become included. It's too easy and gives only those who throw a good feeling, I guess.
Well, just one thing to add here is that it's not only the NGOs that throw dirt. It's yeah, exactly.
Thank you. What strikes me mostly in all these discussions is that people tend to forget that the existing old varieties in these countries still can be used, because in most cases they cannot be protected and they will not be protected. But you see at the same time that the farmers recognize the added value of the modern protected varieties and they want to use them, but they have some difficulties to pay for some royalties. But I think that the argument that farmers are obliged to pay for the seed or extra for the seed and not anymore allowed to exchange and sell the seed is not completely true. And I think, or maybe your comment on that, that argument cannot also be used, because you showed some quite interesting figures in Kenya and experiences of people that what they buy on the market has a lower quality than they buy in the shops.
No, exactly, and I think that I mean there is the complexities in the system that are not always well understood. But on the other hand, I think what is at the basis of it is also really fundamentally different worldviews about what agriculture is or should be. You know, for quite some NGOs, just and also farmers, farmer communities in several countries, the idea that seed is a commodity is really foreign to their way of dealing with seed. So you have a real spectrum of positions, but that the idea, if you find that treating seed as a commodity is really like almost an offense to your traditions, to your ancestors who gave you all the seed, then that is the foundation of being very critical to any kind of legislation that promotes this commodification. So that is a bit of the background, which is often by any proponent of the system immediately swapped off the table. You know, that's also old-fashioned, stupid traditions they don't understand. And for some farmers, indeed, there is, and it really depends on the countries as well. There you see, well, the farmer is very pragmatic. What does the best thing in the ground? And of course, I have my preferences for taste and texture and growing conditions. But if there comes a good variety which I can afford, then I do it. Where in other countries there's a very strict difference. They say, like in Peru for a potato, they never would buy a potato from a former dealer. No, but they buy maize. But they don't eat it because they don't like it, and they cannot cook it the way they used to cook things. But they do that for the market to get some earnings. But they will never eat the hybrid maize, for example. So and that depends really on each and every country. And I think that you will need to reflect on that as a policymaker. What is the situation in your country? Where are the tensions, and how can you? What will the impact be of your system in that country?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jaap Satter and Bram de Jonge, and thank you all.